Professor Saipa Karangan. I will be your moderator this afternoon. To formally start our program, may I call on Ms. Patrina Holihole, a faculty member from the Department of Human and Family Development Studies, for the opening prayer, followed by the singing of the national anthem.
Let us put ourselves in the presence of the Lord. Dear Almighty God, we are grateful for the gift of health and life and this precious time for us to virtually get together. Give us guidance in this meeting so that we may clearly comprehend and tackle all subjects, so that we are led to decisions that will produce worthy and effective results. Direct our steps so that we can best achieve our goals and be able to speak, discuss, act, and make decisions based not solely on our knowledge and understanding, but upon your wisdom. Please be our mediator when we are uncertain and confused. We place our hearts and minds in your hands, and we place you at the center of this meeting. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, ewas ang sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagagang tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal, ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magtitingin, luman ang araw ng walhating pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo, ang hindi kaya na pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
To give us the opening remarks, may I call on the Associate Dean of the College of Human Ecology, Professor Jenny Marie Sunga Amparo.
Good afternoon, everyone. In behalf of Dean Raden Piadoso, who's experiencing real-life issues in terms of logging in, which we will also experience in our synchronous learning, but I hope he could join us in a while. But we'd like to welcome, of course, this esteemed speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Mark Joseph Calano, who will talk about utilizing modules for flexible learning. We'd like to welcome, of course, the faculty members from the College of Human Ecology. We have faculty members from SEAT, from CAS, and the UPLB GE faculty members. Is that correct, ma'am? And other colleges in the university. Again, this is being recorded, and we also have a live stream to our Facebook page of the College of Human Ecology. So this CHE webinar series, which we call the CHE Gearing Up for Flexible Learning, was conceptualized by the College of Human Ecology Curriculum Committee, headed by Dr. Greg Pawilin, to really support our faculty members in terms of preparing our course packs and our teaching and learning preparations and planning for next semester. So I believe some of you have been attending a lot of webinars already, but we hope that these topics, so we have a series, this is the second, I think, Dr. Greg, we have 5, I think, initially lined up to support this preparation and planning. So we hope we could be enjoined by our colleagues, not only from the College of Human Ecology, but the UPLB community, and also our dear partners. So with that, thank you very much. And thank you very much, Dr. Calano. And thank you very much, Dr. Greg.
Thank you, Ma'am Jen. Before we introduce our resource speaker this afternoon, once again, we would like to recognize the presence of our chairpersons and the director from the different departments and institute of the College of Human Ecology. Present this afternoon also is our college secretary and, of course, Associate Dean Ma'am Jen Amparo, and the head of the curriculum committee, Sir Greg, is with us this afternoon. We also would like to thank you for participating po today. Ang ating mga esteemed faculty members are here po from CHE, and of course, faculty members from the College of Arts and Sciences. Meron din po ako nakita taga-engineering po. Welcome po sa ating second Gearing Up webinar. May house rules lang po tayo. We have 2 house rules for this afternoon. First, kindly mute your audio while the lecture is ongoing. And second po, all questions will be entertained after the lecture. Again, welcome po sa lahat ng ating participants this afternoon. And now po, to introduce our resource speaker, may I call on the chair of the curriculum committee, Dr. Greg Pawilen, sir.
Okay, thank you, Teacher Sai. Good afternoon to everyone. Again, welcome to this second series of the webinar that we are organizing to support our faculty members for the flexible learning program of the university. So it is a great honor for me to introduce to you our esteemed speaker for this afternoon. So let me start. Mark Joseph Calano is an associate professor and the graduate school program coordinator of the Department of Philosophy at the Ateneo de Manila University, where he also served as the school's Humanities coordinator for research and creative works and faculty campus minister from 2018 to 2020. He's a graduate of Bachelor of Philosophy, cum laude, Master of Arts in Philosophy, cum laude, Master of Religious Studies, magna cum laude, and PhD in Applied Linguistics, magna cum laude, from St. Louis University in Baguio City, and a graduate of another PhD in Philosophy from the Ateneo de Manila University. He's a postdoctorate fellow at the Scientia Forum in Tübingen, at Durisha in Berlin and Göttingen, Germany, and at the Benedict XVI Center in Vienna, Austria. He is the past president of the Philosophical Association of the Philippines and was the international board member of the Korean Society for Religion and Literature. Mark is also the professor for ancient and medieval philosophy in the Roman Catholic Archdiocesan Seminaries of Pampanga and Manila, the religious seminaries of Claret and La Salette, and at the Loyola School of Theology. Mark is resource speaker on research for the development and security and the rural health and development programs of the Development Academy of the Philippines and of the National Defense College of the Philippines. He is the author of about 60 local and international Scopus and ISI journal articles and of 7 textbooks in the Philippines. He is a chapter brother of the Order of the Most Holy Savior, Brigittine, I don't know if I pronounce it right, monks in Oregon, USA. And in his more normal days, okay, he is a flutist and akidoka. Sugoi, no? Okay, with a Nidan rank, second time level black belt from the Aikikai Hombo Doho in Japan. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Dr. Mark Joseph Calano. Welcome to CHE and welcome to UPLB, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Greg, for that kind introduction. And yes, I'm from the Arneo, if that's how you want to pronounce it. But thank you. Thank you also for those who are here, and thank you to Ma'am Dean for welcoming, for the warm welcome. Today, I'd just like to share about the way we do it, flexible learning, the way we do it at the Ateneo. And most of my sharing today will be drawn from the consistent philosophy, language, and framework in which we continuously try to implement online learning at the Ateneo, and therefore are not always originally mine. They're actually a series of seminars and a series of courses that we have to go through in order to be able to teach, especially this intersession, and eventually in the first semester. The outline of my presentation will only take 3 parts. First, I will talk about the 5 learning principles And then I will focus on modularity because that's really the topic that I was asked to present. And then I will try to also lay down the challenges that we are facing right now on the basis of these 5 principles and on the basis of our students who went through online learning during the intersession, and hopefully learn from you also. No? But even before we begin about the Ateneo way, no, I'd like to pose a question to you, no, and here I want it to be a little bit more interactive. If I can just ask you to go to open a tab and then go to www.menti.com and then enter the code 287076 and just give me 3 words that just describes how you think online learning or teaching will be like. No? So if I may just ask you to just give in 3, so go to menti.com as you can see in front of you right now on the screen, and then you just use the code 287076, and then I'll just ask you to just input 3 words about how you think online learning or teaching will be. So I will move to another screen to show to you the responses of the group. So this is a word cloud for those who are not aware. And the more the words are increases in size, that means the more faculty members or colleagues are inputting the same. I just ask you to take note of the words that are increasing in number, but also to take note of the words that are not increasing in size, because these are still valid sentiments, opinions, if you will, of our colleagues here. So in the word cloud, as it is being presented in front of us, you can see that the word challenging is actually very dominant. But you can also see challenge and challenging, other variations of the same word. Or and then interactive. Yes, it has to be interactive. It has to be exciting. Many says it's difficult, and we'll clarify that also later. Eye-opening, boundless, independent, confused, it's okay. Asynchronous, okay, we will look at that also. Reflective, we'll clarify that. Timely. So far, we only have 26 people who logged in a group of, let me just check how many people, of 73. So let's just give it more time for our young ones to input their words, but also for the young ones upon a time to also introduce their words. So maybe if we can get 40, that's enough, and then we can continue. So I invite those who are here to go to www.menti.com and then use the code 287076, and then answer the question, describe how you think online learning or teaching will be. So there are only 28 who did it so far, and maybe we'll wait until it reaches even until 35, because we're 72 anyway in the group. Okay. Sige po. Just a little participation. Don't worry, it's not the Zumba type of participation. So next to challenging, many people say it's interactive, it's independent, it's difficult, it's interesting. So sige, maybe that's good enough for us, and we can move back to the presentation. So let's go to the 5 principles of adaptive design for learning and what adaptive design for learning is. At Ateneo, it's very important for us to consider where we are right now in this age of the pandemic, And what is our context right now as we actually design courses for our students, as we continue to redesign and realign our courses in accordance with our mission vision, or what is mission critical for us. And it has been very clear since the start of the pandemic that we are actually experiencing something that the military science or even business institutions had been calling right now as the VUCA world. This is actually the environment that we operate in and that we are challenged to actually operate in as a faculty right now. VUCA stands for volatile, complex, ambiguous, and uncertain. These words seem to capture very perfectly the next what we are facing right now, no? In the sense that it's very difficult to predict how much we know about the situation, and the fact that Manila, for example, has been brought back to MECQ does not seem to be very promising at all. And that since we're coming from a GCQ, and that when you look at it from that perspective, we need to be able to design a course that will, in a way, be responsive to the VUCA environment that we are in, and that we have to understand that the VUCA environment does not only apply to us teachers or to our educational institutions, but very much to our students. And that our students are actually most vulnerable right now. And because of that, we need to be able to journey with them in a way that will be sensitive to these uncertain times. In order to respond to these VUCA environment, we have tried we have tried to define very carefully how we're going to move forward. But even before I continue with my discussion, I'd like to inform you that that we are in fact in a very difficult situation, and that we are building the bridge as we go there. There's no assurances, and nobody among us had survived the 1918-1920 pandemic of the Spanish flu, and it's very difficult to also predict how we're going to move forward, or even if what we're going to do will be successful. Somehow, in one way or another, we only need to trust that it will be successful. But also at the same time, we need to understand also that we need to be very flexible in terms of our delivery. And because of that, what I will lay down to you are not hard set rules, but instead suggestions that were given to us on how we should move forward. So let's go to the 5 principles we're talking about. No? So adaptive design for learning. Ateneo, because Ched and somebody else used the word flexible, refused to use the word flexible learning, and that's for obvious reason. And we decided to choose the word adaptive learning. Adaptive came from the ICT world, wherein a particular feature of an application will change whether you open it in a laptop or in a tablet or in a cell phone. It adapts to specific circumstances. And the adaptation is what we wanted to capture in this attempt to design learning. So the goal that we've been aiming at and that we want to clarify is in fact the goal of learning. And that adaptation is only a characteristic of this type of learning that we are going to design. That's basically how we want to design, to explain it. Sorry for that. So there are 5 principles that we at the Ateneo uses in order to design learning. The first one is adaptibility. The second one is active and interactive learning. The third one is the 3 Z's of online learning. The fourth one is asynchronous more than synchronous learning. And the fifth one is modularity. So I will try to attack it one by one, and then just share how we're doing it and how we intend to move forward using it. So adaptability. Adaptability, we said a while ago, is adaptability in 2 modes. One, in terms of design. Second, in terms of delivery. when we say adaptability in terms of design, what we're basically saying there is that we are designing a course specifically. We know that we will move to online learning, and it's inevitable that we are moving to an online learning. But we also recognize that only 80% of our students have at least fluctuating internet access, no? So that because of that, we need to be able to at least still address the 20% who have no internet access, or the majority of the 80% who are operating on the low bandwidth version of the course. So when we sat down together, we were first planning to design modules and to lay down modules using first the hard copy as the template. And when we were first designing, we were saying we need to be able to produce materials for those who do not have any access, until we discovered Canvas, no? Or for our basic education, they're using Schoology and Google Classroom. It will vary depending on whether it's the junior school or junior high school or the basic education department. However, it was there at that level where we recognize that that we can design our courses using a low bandwidth version since we're moving online. And then based on this low bandwidth version, either in Google Classroom or even in Canvas, we will download it in thumb drives, in USBs, and send these USBs to students who do not have access to very good internet, but who can still have access to a laptop, or who can still have access to a gadget for that matter. So what we did was that to design a course using a low bandwidth. When we say low bandwidth, that means lectures are actually not going to be spontaneously delivered in a camera, but instead are going to be really calculated, even transcribed, so that our students who cannot click on the YouTube link or who cannot have access to videos can still download the transcription. Yes, the students who have high bandwidth can already watch our lectures, but we cannot consider those with the high bandwidth, but we need to consider those who have low bandwidths. That's why lectures of not more than 6 minutes, and we were really told not to go more than 6 minutes, and later on you will understand also why, were actually transcripted, and that even subtitles are provided for students who are not able to have a high bandwidth. What am I saying? Adaptability in this sense allowed us to design a course on the low bandwidth version, and for teachers to actually invest on printed modules whenever they're available, and utilize on this one as jumping grounds for the development of their courses. And it is based on this low bandwidth version that groups of people among us sat together and redesigned their courses. And when I say redesign the courses, I really mean it, redesign the courses. We recognize that we need to actually chop a lot of details off our courses and really focus on the learning outcomes. Which learning outcomes basically is important for this course in order for this course to function in its most basic mode. We needed to do that because we were always warned by psychologists at Ateneo that the attention span and also the energy levels of our students at the time of the pandemic is more or less only 50%. And therefore, we need to really remove all unnecessary data in our courses in order for us to be able to provide only the necessary information that they need or the necessary skills. for that reason, the basic design necessitated for us a reconsideration of our learning outcomes, but not only a reconsideration of our learning outcomes, a continuous realignment of these learning outcomes in terms of the program goals and also of the university ideal graduates. So that a continuous realignment was done in order for us to really say there is a duplication in these learning outcomes, and therefore we can actually remove this one from one course and put it in the other course. But not only were we able to identify overlaps, we were also able to identify which courses can eventually have shared assessments with another course because they aim at a similar learning outcome. So what I'm basically saying is that the basic design is really a group of experts who sat down together to identify which is the minimal competencies that are necessary in the designing of this course, and not only the minimal requirement necessary for the designing of this course, it also allowed us to identify the non-negotiable for the course. And then that basic design is handed down to the teacher, to a teacher, so that even if I'm the one, for example, I teach philo of religion or I teach ethics at the Ateneo, and that the basic design was constructed by a group of faculty, I can still contextualize it in accordance to my own teaching strategies, in accordance to my own specialization, in accordance with who I am as the teacher. So adaptability, therefore, in this framework allowed us to, on the one hand, design courses that is aligned with our program outcomes and with our ideal graduates, identify what is the least competencies that they need in the completion of this course, and also identify possible decompression in the curriculum because of shared assessments between and among courses. But not only that, it allowed us to, in a way, recognize what is not negotiable and build on it as a teacher, and therefore adding the contextualized layer on top of it. So adaptability also tells us that it can be online and it can be offline, which means, therefore, that Canvas tolerates the entire downloading of the entire module or modules, and the printing of the entire modules, but also of printed modules to be turned into an online version. So inevitable po yun. The way we were taught was that we cannot presuppose that our students are operating on a high bandwidth, and therefore, while it's easy to record oneself and upload it in YouTube, that recording must still be trimmed down by actually transcribing the record, making sure that only the most important makes it into the recording, and not only that, that our students are able to actually target their learning experiences. So that's what adaptability means for us. So in a group of 50, for example, in a class of 30, we need to constantly ask, do you have at least a low bandwidth? So that if a student immediately says, I do not have bandwidth, we need to be able to report them to another office. We call it OAR. I'm not really sure what it stands for already because of the many acronyms we're operating in. But the OAR is the office that's responsible for the sending of thumb drives to students with no or zero bandwidth access. From our end, this is actually what brought us to Rappler a few weeks ago when a student received a thumb drive from the Ateneo containing the modules of the class that he enrolled in. I'll stop there for adaptability. I'll accommodate any questions if there are questions for the meantime. Wala. If you have questions, you can just unmute yourself because I cannot see the chat. If there's no question, then I can go to the second principle. No, the second principle is a principle of active and interactive learning. We think that transitioning to online is not about technology, but about learning. The goal of what we do and why we do this is still to facilitate learning. I can use 20 different apps in my course, in Canvas, or even in Google Drive, or Google Classroom, or even in Moodle. But if learning is not targeted, if the learning experience is actually poor, then I have failed as a teacher. The goal is still learning. And when we say learning, I need to pay attention that as a teacher, I approach my modules from the perspective of the teacher, but not from the perspective of a learner. And it is here that we're constantly warned that learning is a student experience, not a teacher experience. So that my efficiency as a teacher, my effectiveness, even if I can say that now, depends largely on whether I am able to facilitate learning. And again, we go back to the relationship between learning outcomes and assessments. Yes, the first thing we need to put together is learning outcomes and assessments. Why? Because the measure whether I reached or attained my learning outcomes are actually my assessments. Are my assessments being measured by my learning? Are my learning outcomes measured by my assessments, or maybe not? Because if there's no alignment between the two, then I might as well rethink about what I'm doing, or I might as well rethink about how I'm moving forward, or how I'm facilitating learning, or what learning experiences I am actually trying to formulate or trying to lead. So we think that interactive learning is still possible in an online setup. We've seen how our students commented on Facebook. We've seen how our students are active in Twitter, chatting and talking with people they barely met. And we know, therefore, that interactive learning can still happen even in an online setup. And it is here that we recognize that more than a sage on the stage, we are more guides on the side now. And therefore, that our goal is really to design the learning experience so that the students are able to learn from the experience. Too many a times we see students post TLDR, uh, too long, didn't read, di ba? Or sometimes we see them use didn't mind or something like that. And we need to pay attention to those, because it says a lot also about where our students are and whether we are in fact able to facilitate learning. So allow me to leave this warning from you, especially right now that there are just so many videos and everything about online learning. There are many trees in the forest. Choose the tree you're going to climb, because it's easy to get lost when you look at so many trees. So, so the consolation for teachers who are afraid and scared is that this is still not about technology yet. This is still about learning, and we want to facilitate that learning for everyone. So, there's a very beautiful quote in our course that says, children were born as learners. They learned from their own energy until they went to school. And when they went to school, the first thing they had to learn was to stop learning and begin being taught. You know, of course, the autonomous learning is still a very important. It's still a very important scenario that we have to consider. Like for example, today this intercession which started first week of July, I taught Phil of Religion, and I expected that my students will pay attention to the course 1.5 hours every day. But in all reality, they're not able to participate 1.5 hours every day, even if that's the schedule that's provided to them. Because there are other variables that we need to take into consideration that can distract them from the learning process, and that we need to also consider that, and really still push them to take charge of their learning experience. We cannot simply say, that's your module, survive. No, we cannot do that. So I will cut my discussion here, because I will put a link in the chat group, and I will ask you to consider that link and watch it for me for 3 minutes only, just for 3 minutes. So I'll post the link now in the chat group. Please, in your own private space, please watch it, and then I will resume after that.
The 3 C's of online learning. What does going online mean for us teachers? Here are 2 of the most common practices. For many, it may mean doing exactly what you do in a face-to-face class, except this time, you're doing it online. So you deliver your lecture live, sharing your slides with your audience, or you could just record your lecture and ask your students to watch it at a different time. This is called remote teaching. It's one way of doing online learning, but it's by no means the only way. And especially when you get carried away with your talk, it's surely not the most effective way for learning. Here's a second common interpretation of going online. The teacher simply posts materials or emails them to the students. These materials may be documents for students to read or videos for them to watch, or they could be a series of tasks assigned to be accomplished and submitted at a given deadline. We could call this remote self-study. It's another way of doing online learning, but neither is it the only way, and it's certainly not the best way to help our students. There are many different kinds of online learning experiences that we can offer our students, and the key is not to limit ourselves only to remote teaching or to remote self-study. Here's a helpful recipe in cooking up effective online learning. All you need are 3 essential ingredients. Let's call them the 3 C's of online learning. First, you need content. This one's a no-brainer. Obviously, for our students to learn, they need to learn something. Content comes in many forms. An article that you have curated from a website, a PDF of a selected chapter of a book, a real-time or recorded lecture that you deliver to your class, or a link to a particularly engaging YouTube clip on the subject matter. The real challenge is how can we share content with our learners so that they actually end up engaging with it and getting into it. If they just browse through the content, as we tend to do when we're reading online, there will be neither deep thinking nor deep learning. The second thing we need, of course, the coach. And by coach, we mean the instructor or the teacher. The instructor's presence in an online class is a crucial ingredient of online learning. You as the coach can maintain your presence in a variety of ways. You don't have to be at a synchronous meeting with them all the time. You can also interact with them as effectively by responding to the posts they make, by marking their submissions and giving them feedback. The question is, how and when? For effective learning, we need to deliberately design and strategically schedule our presence and interaction with our students. The final and often most neglected ingredient of online learning is community. That is, the class or the group of learners taking the course. When students join an online class, they are joining a community of learners. Students can learn so much more from one another through discussions and group work, so it would be such a waste to keep the online learning experience individual and private. Our goal as designers of online learning is to make available different opportunities to interact with one another and to learn from one another, whether in small groups or as a whole class, whether at the same time online or at different times, whether in the presence of the teacher or not. So when we talk about online learning, we're really referring to a whole range of diverse learning experiences offered to students so that they can engage not only with the content or the coach, but also with their community of learners. It's important to have a balanced recipe. As we can imagine, too much of one ingredient is bound to spoil the meal. Too much of the coach, no matter how brilliant, yet your learners will want some more flavor or may even end up with a bad taste in their mouth. If you add too much content and too little of the others, you will most likely give your learners indigestion. Finally, an overdose of community may actually get in the way of learning itself. Learners may have fun, but not learn anything substantial. Remember, the best designed online learning experience, like a well-balanced meal, should not only offer a variety of flavors, but should, more importantly, also pack a nutritional punch. How can we cook up online learning in such a way that we serve our students a delicious and substantial meal?
Okay na po?
Opo.
Sige. So there you see that the logic of the three Z's is very important for online learning. That means in trying to design the experiences for our students, we need to be able to, sorry, naghang yung laptop ko. We need to be able to consider three very important ingredients: the content, the coach, and the community. What do we mean by content, coach, and community? Here you see that content is rather cheap because everything is literally Googleable in an internet stage. And because it's cheap, we need to pay attention to how we basically curate and create our materials. Going online does not actually mean that we need to create all the materials. Going online can mean that we can curate the material in a way that it facilitates the learning experience of our students. So I will reiterate that because that's a source of anxiety for many. No, so content can mean lectures, readings, videos, and other materials that have been created or curated for the learners to interact with and learn from. Remember the adage, less is more. It's crucial to be selective here to encourage greater learner engagement. In philosophy, for example, we were discouraged to simply give a 20-page reading. We were asked to chop our readings into smaller chunks, and we were asked to engage those smaller chunks almost immediately in the form of a recorded lecture, in the form of a recording, or even a typewritten explanation of the way of what we wanted them to focus on, and that's basically content. Less is more. That means the more targeted, the more straight the engagement, the better. Okay? So, long gone are the days of the eat all you can. Ngayon, balanced meal na po lahat. Keto mode na. Well, keto is not balanced. But balanced meal na. Small chunks of almost everything. And then that's the one that facilitates a good set of learning. So, I will reiterate that. Less is more. In fact, later on, when we go to the challenges, you'd realize that we first design our modules, our courses into 6 modules for one semester. But now we're already considering whether to turn it only into 5 or 4 modules because 6 modules is just too much for our students. And since we're considering learning hours, no longer contact hours, but learning hours, we decided to simply focus on considering how many learning hours will our student employ in the performance of the learning tasks and things like that. The coach, that's who we are as teachers. Our presence and interactions with the learner are very important. and this can be synchronous or asynchronous. And the goal is to design and schedule this interaction strategically. Like even at the beginning, we need to define already how many synchronous lectures would be effective. The minimal suggestion before was for us when we started the 5 weeks intersession course was only 3 scheduled synchronous session. One in the beginning, one in the middle, and one in the end. However, we discovered that our students cannot operate only on 3 synchronous sessions. So we need to open optional synchronous sessions that are recorded so that the students who are not able to participate in the synchronous sessions can download the recorded synchronous sessions and still learn from the synchronous exchange even when they were not able to be there during the synchronous sessions. But the point is, it has to be scheduled. And we designed our courses in a way that schedules are still available so that if teachers schedule synchronous classes, it can only be done within the scheduled time, and therefore conflicts about time and time between with other teachers are actually avoided. But how long the synchronous sessions are, we discovered that the most effective synchronous sessions last only for 45 minutes and nothing more. If you keep on doing that for more than an hour, they get bored, and if they can only swipe you, they will. And then how often should the coach give feedback to the learners in the discussion board? We learned that it has to be often. Because the quality of the interactions in the discussion board will also diminish when the teacher is not reading them or commenting on them or liking them. So the discussions are very important because this is actually also learning from the community. And as you've seen in the 3 C's, the 3 sources of learning is the content, the material that you use, the teacher who designed the learning experience and gives the feedback, but also the community, which is actually more because of the discussions. And the discussions, learning from the community, will be sacrificed if the students recognize that you are not reading their entries, or if you are not participating, or if you're just leaving them behind. And the 3rd C is the class or fellow learners with whom the learner can discuss and work either synchronously by recitation or presentation via video conferences in plenary or smaller group conferences, but primarily asynchronously in group tasks, which Canvas can facilitate so easily. You can create smaller groups in Canvas, discussion boards with fellow classmates that they can interact with or even peer review with. No? So as much as possible, it's very important to balance the 3 learning. No, now it is here where we need to distinguish what type of learning we really employ. Here, in front of you, you see actually the spectrum. On the other hand, there's remote teaching. On the other hand, there's remote self-study. Remote teaching is when I primarily ask you, okay, attend this class, I synchronously, I will talk the whole time, and then after 1 hour, let's call it a day, period. Remote teaching, that's really a relationship between the coach and the content alone. I taught in UP also before, and some teachers are like that, no? They will just go to the classroom, say their piece, and leave, ganon. On the other hand, remote self-study is when I simply give you your reading and tell you, okay, read this, read this, read this, read this, read this, read this, read this. Survive on your own. Watch these videos and things like that. I will post everything in the email, or I will post everything in YouTube and things like that. But that's going to be problematic because it already presupposes autonomous learning. But the goal that we want and that we were encouraged at the Ateneo, at least even for our senior students, is actually online learning. And online learning is when we design online experiences that still enable interaction between content, the coach or the teacher, and the community. So that there are 3 sources of information for a student that's enrolled in the course. The content that I provide, or that the readings that I choose, the coach that discusses or explains things in recorded videos or even in through lecture notes, and the community that actually tries to assimilate, accommodate, appropriate the learning experience that's being shared. So that's online learning, and therefore we don't just leave our students there hanging, no. So we looked at adaptability already. We looked at active and interactive learning, which is the second principle. We looked at the 3 C's of online learning, which is the heart of online learning. And I hope you keep that link to the video because it's very important. And then we look at now synchronous and asynchronous learning. The courses that we are encouraged to design is predominantly asynchronous. This is helpful, especially for our students who have fluctuating bandwidth. Like if the bandwidth in their place works only at night, designing the course asynchronously will actually provide them with the opportunity to learn at the best time that they can learn, or access material, or even download material at the best possible time. So, but I'm not saying that asynchronous or synchronous learning should not actually be encouraged. In fact, the benefit of synchronous learning is that it's immediate, it's spontaneous, interactions are direct, there's a sense of community that's created. But we need to take also into consideration the drawbacks, like scheduling difficulties. That's why we've said, keep your schedules. If it's an MWF 1 to 2, keep that schedule because that's the schedule for that class. That's also, our suggestion is that that's also the consultation hour of the teacher, so that the teacher is actually online during the time of the class for consultation purposes, so that if the students have a question, they can be addressed immediately. We suggest that you open a help desk in your Canvas or Moodle, or just be present in your Google Classroom for this one. And then the rest of the time, if you don't have a class, it's okay not to be in front of the computer, because we don't want you to lose your life also, no? But synchronous sessions may be challenging for people, especially for teachers who have their children playing, or who also needs to be there with their children. And then, of course, synchronous, as we said, is more biased for extroverted and articulated learners. We've learned through Canvas that when we moved online, our introverted students started becoming noisy. I mean, chatty. They started sharing also. They started opening up and the like. And they are able to really consider, really digest the data, and really comment responsibly also. For that reason, while we encourage still that there has to be synchronous sessions just for the determination of roles, routines, and rules at the beginning of the course, we suggest that if synchronous sessions are employed, they be focused merely on interaction, not on discussion. Content is cheap. We don't want to waste our students' time by you lecturing in front of them, because that can be done by recording yourself in a PowerPoint, narrating using a PowerPoint. That can be done when you self-video yourself and uploading your video in an unlisted way in YouTube. That can be done that way. So you don't need synchronous sessions. But when there are synchronous sessions, I hope you maximize that for interaction purposes. But this will all change, as I said, depending on 3 factors. Learners' access, whether your students have high bandwidth or low bandwidth or no bandwidth. Learner autonomy, whether your student can really understand things alone or not. And learner task. What is the task that you're asking them to comply? From there, I will move to modularity. And I'll ask Sir Mac to play for me a short video on modularity.
From planning a course in terms of weeks and sessions to planning it in terms of modules. Most of us have grown accustomed to designing our courses in terms of weeks and sessions. How many weeks and sessions do I have to teach what I need to teach in this course and try to make my students learn what they need to learn? Most of us have gotten pretty used to this way of planning our courses, planning them as a whole for an entire semester or an entire trimester or at least an entire quarter. We ask ourselves, for which weeks and for which sessions do I schedule the lectures to be delivered, the discussions to be conducted, and the different readings and tasks to be assigned to my students? But the problem with this traditional way of designing is that our courses end up somewhat inflexible. If there are disruptions in classes, it won't be so easy to tell which of your target learning outcomes your students have already attained and which ones they haven't. Another problem is that more often than not, we teachers tend to teach first and test last. So sometimes teachers end up giving an assessment only towards the end of a course. As a result, our learners also end up having to wait till the very end before they receive any substantial feedback on their learning and performance. Instead of this usual way of designing the entire course at the outset, adaptive design proposes a shift to modular design. A course is designed so that it consists of 6 modules, 6 building blocks, each of which can, ideally but not necessarily, be a standalone. When we say modular design, we mean that the course is organized into discrete and meaningful chunks that allow for flexibility. The modules can be recombined and used together or separately for different purposes, as part of an entire course or as standalone seminar workshops. More importantly, when we designers discipline ourselves to plan our courses in terms of modules, we have natural interim checkpoints within the course and smaller feedback loops. At the end of 1 or 2 modules, we can assess our students and give them more timely feedback on what they've learned and what else they need to learn. So, can you begin to reimagine your course in terms of 6 or so modules? What would be an effective way of chunking your course?
What you see there is really just chunking the course into meaningful it's actually meaningful chunks, but not only meaningful chunks, but we're able to evaluate it already, their performance, so that they don't actually fail only in the end, or they're not only tested only in the end. So the 2 big ideas that was presented there is, on the one hand, organize your course into several discrete and meaningful chunks or modules that you can use flexibly, recombining in various ways for different purposes and classes, such as an entire course or even several seminar workshops. Second, to identify natural interim checkpoints within the course when it would be helpful to give your learners feedback without waiting for the end of the course. Remember, a while ago, I said we normally design in terms of learning outcomes, and sometimes one module captures 1 or 2 learning outcomes already. Then that means you can already design an assessment at the end of that module in order for you to identify whether the student was able to attain the competencies or the skills that are necessary or are required by such a module. That's the beauty of modularity, that we're able to understand it piecemeal so that just in case there's an immediate cancellation of the rest of the semester, at least you already have sufficient data or evidence in order for you to provide a final grade for your student. Because you're not just waiting for the final project, or you're not just waiting for the final exam, but in within the course, there are actually natural checkpoints. So So our process is actually those, no, at Ateneo: adaptability in design and delivery, active and interactive learning, the 3 C's: content, coach, and community, asynchronous, more than synchronous sessions, and modularity. Uh, However, even if we've done that, no, the Admo Freedom Wall was still consistently flocked by attempts or pleas from our students to go on mass LOA, or even that they say they cannot take it anymore. They're drained in online classes. Their body clocks are all thwarted. They cannot focus because they're living with their parents and they're not used to it. Their businesses are failing and things like that. And because of that, we still need to facilitate learning even in these scenarios. And that's the reason why we need to listen close to the ground, no, pay attention to how our students are responding, to how they're actually accepting it, di ba? The 6 modules is ideal when everything is normal, but maybe it's not ideal in an age of the pandemic. And for that reason, we are still constantly asked to reevaluate and constantly assess how we're moving forward and what are actually the decisions that we needed to implement in the course. So more and more we realize, as I said a while ago, that we need to decrease content, so that we decided to turn Ateneo into quarters, and there will be 2 quarters in 1 semester. So that's 9 weeks for every quarter. And we've decided to divide their units into two also, so that if they're enrolled in 24 units, they will only take 12 units of courses for 9 weeks and another 12 units for 9 weeks. But we discovered that instead of designing for a 9-week module, no, distributing the tasks, the activities for 9 weeks, we discovered that we have to decrease the content and just focus on essential learning experiences. We've discovered, as I said a while ago, that the attention and energy levels of our students is only at 50%. And also of teachers who find it difficult to be always in front of the computer, trying to curate courses, trying to consider intellectual property and the like, di ba? Kaya ako for example, in my Canvas, I only use Wiki Commons so that it's free. Or even in the usage of our annotating devices, we only use those that came from our library. Or we only use articles that were downloaded from EBSCO or from JSTOR, parang ganon. But we have to decrease our requirements and tasks because we thought it's better to err on the side of compassion. Parang we don't live in an ordinary time, and that it's better to pay attention also to where our students are and what's going on. No, I mean, these are even Ateneans already that I'm talking about. I'm not saying that they are in a better position than UP students, but the degree of vulnerability might change depending on the socioeconomic status of where our students are coming from. And I think also that it's very important to consider that, no? So decompress and then design your course as well, no? That's how this is my suggestion: decompress and design. So when courses share the same learning outcomes, think of a shared assessment so that the students are hitting 2 birds with 1 stone, something like that. And we do that by beginning with the end in mind. That's really how we design, diba? This is the OBE model. This is also the understanding by design model. It's really a backward design model. Begin with the end in mind. It sounds so Aristotelian for those who knows Aristotle's philosophy, but it really makes a lot of sense. Begin with the end in mind. So before I go to the second to the last slides, there's another video that I want you to see, and this is actually the more connecting again the relationship of the learning outcomes and the assessment. So So I'll stop sharing and give it to Sir Marvin again.
Evaluate to validate. How do we know if our learners have learned what they're supposed to learn? In short, how will we know whether or not our learning outcomes have been attained? We can't just answer these questions by issuing blanket statements like, let's give them tests, or make them answer open-ended questions that entail higher-order thinking. We have to think in terms of evidences of learning. What evidences of learning should we ask our learners to furnish to prove that they've learned what they're supposed to learn? A criminal analogy is helpful here. Learners should be presumed innocent of learning until they are proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt. When we design assessments, we should begin with our course learning outcomes. Our assessments should allow us to make valid inferences about how well the students have attained these outcomes and not others. They should tell us whether we've hit the bullseye in attaining the learning outcomes we are targeting or how far off the mark we are. This gives teachers a chance to give feedback to their students. In other words, do the assessments measure what they are supposed to measure? There are two kinds of learning outcomes that we need to assess, and both are important. First, the acquisition of knowledge and skills. And second, the application of these knowledge and skills, or what we call competences. Let's talk about assessing the first type of learning outcome, the acquisition of knowledge and skills. Let us say that for a module in history, a desired learning outcome is for students to know and distinguish between primary and secondary sources. All you need to do here is to come up with a quiz that asks students to define both and give examples for each. Such a simple objective test already does the job of providing the evidence that you need in order to infer whether or not students have learned what they're supposed to learn about primary and secondary skills. Here's one litmus test for the assessments we design, whether they're intended to measure knowledge and skills or competences. Can learners do what we're asking them to do in the assessment without having learned what we want them to learn? If the answer is yes, then our assessments are not measuring what they're supposed to measure. They're measuring something else. Now, how about when you want to assess not just knowledge and skills, but competences? Let's go back to our history example. A possible target competence for history is for students to be able to use primary or secondary sources, depending on the researcher's purpose and the nature of the research problem. Clearly, this competence calls for an application of students' knowledge of what primary and secondary sources are. To assess whether or not they have acquired this competence, you may offer students an actual research problem and ask them to curate primary and secondary sources that would help them investigate the problem and to justify the need for these primary or secondary sources. Such an annotated bibliography would serve as a pretty good and valid assessment of this competence. Compare that to another assessment that asks students for a thorough discussion of the process to locate the sources needed to investigate a research problem. This second assessment does not enable students to demonstrate the competence of actually identifying, locating, and curating different historical sources. It only proves that they have the competence to explain this process, which is not our target competence. In short, this assessment measures something else and is not, for this reason, a valid assessment. Recall that achieving a competence means that learners are able to apply their acquired knowledge and skills effectively in real-world contexts, with all its complex and novel challenges. Such a real-world application calls for what is called authentic assessments. The best way to understand authentic assessments is to go back to our basketball analogy. We know the difference between the drills and the actual game. The drills that coaches make players do show them whether or not their players have mastered the skills of dribbling the ball, passing it, or making a three-point shot. It is only, however, in the actual playing of the game, with all its unpredictability, When the players are pitted against another team under novel and complex conditions, that their competence is tested and demonstrated. The game is an authentic assessment, the drills are not. Only in the game are players placed under complex real-world conditions with all their unpredictable challenges. To win the game, players need more than just a mastery of their skills. They need to interpret conditions as they arise on the court, make quick decisions, communicate with their teammates, and execute their skills strategically in the game, complete with all its messiness. To assess for competence, don't mistake drills for the game. Design authentic assessments that simulate real-world contexts. Assign tasks that should not be overly scaffolded. The task we assign should be as complex as a game, with some of the challenges and uncertainties that one actually encounters in the real world, often with incomplete or even conflicting data. So that just like players in a game, learners need to exercise their judgment as to which knowledge and skills they need to employ at any given time. And don't think that authentic assessments need to be a full-blown project. Remember our example of an assessment of a competence for history. The annotated bibliography is very much an authentic assessment. After all, it is not its format that defines whether or not an assessment is authentic. It is its capability to require a student to demonstrate a competence in a real-world situation. So remember, a crucial piece in designing online learning is assessment. We need to evaluate in order to validate that indeed our learners have not only acquired the desired knowledge and skills, but also the competence to apply them in real-world contexts.
Okay, so as we were saying, assessment is the key process in instruction. It is only through assessment that we can find out whether what has been taught has been learned. Assessment is therefore the bridge between teaching and learning. So we design our assessments in a way that we don't simply give an exam. No, that's really not the way to move forward. But to really think, what are the authentic assessments that we can lay down? In fact, if I may just complicate your education vocabulary, that will even create a distinction between formative assessments and summative assessments, which are the assessments that we can give but will not grade, and which are the assessments that we will grade because we have already tested them formatively, something like that. So that's it. I actually shared with you one, that we live in a VUCA world. Two, that there are 5 principles that we employ at the Ateneo in order for us to adjust and confront this VUCA world. 3, that despite so, we have challenges and therefore we have to go back to the designing of our modules so that more and more they become acceptable, tolerable, chunkable learning experience for our students. I'll end it there. Thank you very much. I can accommodate questions now if there are questions. But before that, I give credit to the Ateneo Science and Art of Learning and Teaching, or SALT Institute. Does the saying, pass the salt. So I'll stop it there, and then I can be engaged.
Thank you, Doc Mark. Thank you for that very timely and significant talk po. The floor is now open for your questions. Kindly click the raise hand button if you have a question po. You may also write your questions in the chat box. Any question po?
So you'd see, no, that from our end, we're also re-evaluating our curriculum from the courses up to the ideal Ateneo graduate. But we're also looking at it across year levels because we have different programs across year level. And for that reason, there are actually many committees that are actually working right now just to do these alignments of learning outcomes, but also of trying to reconceptualize our courses so that it will adapt itself to the demands of the scenario of the pandemic. Sige po, Ma'am Jeanette, please.
Yes, thank you, Mark, for that very informative lecture. At least, I haven't really taught really online yet because I'm actually on sabbatical leave, no? But anyway, when I get back, at least I'll know how to like prepare for it. But my question actually is this, because usually we all know that every semester our classes are filled with different kinds of students. They come from different backgrounds, different preparations, and experiences, among others. So when we do prepare for a class, at least the usual way that we usually do is what we do is we try to determine first at the first opportunity the nature of this particular student, so that we can like center more or less our lessons to really catch really what they might be in most need of as of that moment, and therefore try to redesign our usual things. Because like in my case, I always redesign every semester. I mean, I might have like very similar cases or whatever, whatnot, but there's always something different in every semester. At least that's for me, So how can we actually have that kind of leeway in order for us to be able to make every experience like how do you call that, very very meaningful rather for all, our students? I mean, how does remote learning in this particular case differ in terms of trying to catch that distinct or the differences in this different classroom setups that we are going to encounter in the coming semester, and how do we do that in a remote setting?
Yes. Thank you, Ma'am Jeanette, for that question. So first, what we do is to design the courses first in relation to the curriculum, because the course is there specifically for a purpose. And for us at Ateneo, our GE is not only 36 units. We actually operate on an 80 plus units core course. That's how we call it. We don't call it GE. And it is this GE that actually creates a very strong liberal arts foundation for our students. So the first thing we do is to make sure that the course does in fact function in accordance to its role in the attainment of the graduate attributes, or in pursuing the mission vision of the school. So that's how we operate at the Ateneo. There's a sense of alignment, and there's a sense of continuity in the courses, so that each of the courses are actually helping on each other. Now, but that only constitutes the basic design, as if I may go back to that understanding of basic design. Eventually, when we are given students, for example, I teach philosophy, but because all Ateneans needs to enroll in 12 units of philosophy, I will have students from management engineering and from psychology, even from those who are enrolled in ECE and things like that. So we really expect totally different students every semester. But that's also where the beauty of the course comes in, because adaptability in design facilitates in a way the teacher's contextualization of his examples, the teacher's attempt to make sense and make meaning, provide authentic assessments for students in terms of the skills that they need and in relation to their profession and things like that, which I think or takes into consideration whether they're coming from a poor family or from a really rich family and things like that. So I think it's the contextualization that will operate. So when we look at it from that perspective, though, the examples does not really affect the content and the goal of the class, because the goal of the class is aligned with the learning outcomes or the program outcomes, and therefore it is only in relation to that the course has value in relation to the entire curriculum. Parang ganon, Ma'am Jeanette. So yung ugali nila, kung saan sila based, and or what culture we can tap and things like that. This can be edited. The lectures can be edited. The lectures can be clarified further. And that's when it becomes more interesting for us as teachers, because it's not true that once we are done with the course, we will only play it over and over again. As teachers, we need to constantly review whether the design of the course is still makes sense. Are we still able to provide the learning experiences that we want, that is that can contribute to the learning goals of the course and things like that po. I hope I clarified your answer, Ma'am Jeanette. Your question, Ma'am Jeanette.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much for that, Mark. Just like a follow up. So I think that's what you were trying to drum in at the first, wherein you said that in terms of adaptability, that the assessment really should really start in the beginning, because that is going to more or less pave the way for any kind of customization strategies you have to do depending on the class, okay, the members of the class who are at present with you at that particular moment. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ma'am Jeanette. Yes, you hit it to the point, actually. Thank you, Ma'am. There are a few questions, like Ma'am Ronadan says, providing timely and frequent feedback. Yes, that's why there has to be constant checks, and the feedback does not always need to come in terms of grading, as it can come in terms of liking posts, commending them, engaging them. In fact, you can also consider, for example, citing them in your lectures. Like, oh, I like the opinion that was posted by like this and like that. So there's a human element also in the feedbacking, and the student knows that you've read the post and that you appreciated the post, something like that. So that's also very important for them, because if the feedback will come only in the end, they will be clueless how they perform in the entire semester, only to get a low grade in the end. But it's really the responsibility and the duty of the teacher to tell the students that they're not learning, or that they need to improve on this one, and that can only be done when there are regular checks. The nice thing about Canvas, or the usage of the online learning management resource, or LMS, is that objective quizzes are not actually going to be a burden to the teachers, because they only need to set everything, and then once the student go through it, the scores are already given to them immediately. So regular check for understanding is what we suggest, especially every after a lecture, just to make sure that the students understood what the lecture is about. So do you have a technical group to help you design and produce your AVPs? We have at Ateneo, that we have Arete. That's the group that releases magisterial lectures, and they're the one who helps in the recording of theater-looking presentations. However, we don't have for recordings that we do for ourselves. There's none, ma'am. We do it on our own. That's why paminsan kailangan namin bumili ng yung mga round light, ano bang tawag doon sa mga bilog na ilaw na yon. Kailangan namin bumili ng powder para hindi kami makintab at hindi kami sa harap nung camera mukhang hinahabol kami ng baby oil, mga ganon. So sometimes we have to do it. Even buying, for example, microphones so that our voices are always modulated. These are already actually left to the teacher for him to acquire. So talagang yung technical, wala po talagang technical na pinoprovide sa amin. Although for the LMS and the like, we have a team that actually helps us, that trains us for the usage of Canvas, for example, and the like. There's a YouTube video that I posted in the chat group that you can also check, and it just gives you 10 very simple tips on online learning, and that this blogger professor also provides very concrete steps on how you should video yourself. And dapat sa bahay, dapat maliwanag, dapat naglalakad, o dapat nagkikwento lang, so that it does not look like it's purely formalized and that it's really like a formal lecture, but there's a sense of just the communicative nature of language, just chatting with the students, discussing with them insights and things like that, which are also very important for online learning, so that they do not sense the formality of everything, but they also recognize that there's still a person behind the screen, and that they can in fact chat and talk to this person also. So to help in the design and produce the AVPs, there is a formal group. These are the magisterial lectures that's also released in YouTube and accessible to everybody. But other than that, we're on our own. There's another question. What strategies do you have or do suggest that we cater to 40 high school students with varying tech and internet availability? If it's high school, it's going to be different, because we need to take into consideration differences in terms of autonomy and policies, in terms of routines, in terms of scheduling and all of those. Because they are high school, they still operate into very high or very strict, they have to be put in very strict routinary processes in order for them to find themselves in a school setup. And for that reason, it will demand a more rigorous application of the principles that I talked about. And increased synchronicity, for example, dapat laging may synchronous sessions. How do we check attendance and things like that? Dapat laging naka-on yung mga camera nila, mga ganun po yung mga strategies. It will be more difficult, of course, the more the years becomes younger, it will be more difficult. So if you're teaching college, we're lucky because we're teaching autonomous learners. The younger they become, the more difficult things will be. Yun lang po yung kaya kong sabihin. I'm sorry, but sige po.
Sa chat box from Ronadine. When we determine the number of modules contained in a course, it is based on the number of groups of related contents that you can combine, or are there other considerations to this?
When we look at it from that perspective in terms of dividing modules, we just said the one that will really define your modules is the learning outcomes. How many modules do you need to fulfill the learning outcomes or provide the skills or competences necessary for the learning outcomes? And that can mean 3 modules only, 4 modules. The ideal is 6 modules so that they're not actually working too long in one module, and that each module should last more or less 9 to 12 hours, so that there's still, like, if it's 9 hours times 6, that's like 54 learning hours, which is equivalent to the 60 contact hours that CHED demands for those who are under its regulation. So magbabago po talaga depending. Yes, I agree with Sir Mo or Ma'am Mo that they demand double. Actually, that's true. Others, the real counting is actually double. No, so if there's like 60 contact hours, they turn it into 120 learning hours dapat. But at the Ateneo, when we even designed, for example, for just 54 learning hours, it seemed like it's demanding more from our students, and that the estimates that we have provided did not actually match with how long it's really taking them to read a particular essay, how long it's actually taking them to address certain group tasks and things like that. Lalo pag may group assignments, nahihirapan po sila kasi hindi nga sila synchronous mag-online. Iba-iba sila ng oras mag-online. And yet, if they are compelled or asked to produce an outcome in the end, it will take more than 2 weeks of exchanges, just only they can release in order for them to release a a group output. So lahat po 'yon kinakailangan may consider. So far, we've decreased at the Ateneo. As I said, we're only operating on 54 learning hours. But the way that we experience it right now, we still need to decrease and decompress our courses so that we're actually eyeing only on 40 hours, 40 learning hours, and then to play it by ear. So for this intersession, there's only 6 weeks, and I designed 5 modules only. When the students were telling me it's very difficult for them to catch up with the discussions, with the tasks that they have to deliver and things like that, I need to remove so many discussions in Module 4 and Module 5 just so they're able to breathe a little bit before their final oral exams. So ganun po yung nangyayari. Parang iba yung karanasan nila.
Sir, another question from Ma'am Jen po. I think what is not being discussed in most of our current webinars is how the faculty members will be evaluated in terms of teaching. Will we use the same set? Set should also be adjusted given this different teaching mode.
And you're right, Ma'am Jennifer, it's called the ring light. But of course, the evaluation will change. It needs to change because the classroom experiences will be different. And that it will necessitate a different set of skills. Kaya nga we have to retool ourselves for online learning. But it's very difficult to change set because that's a test and it's a standardized test, and therefore will demand a lot of study in order for us to be able to change or revise that. No, a lot of factor analysis, because it has to implement or consider online conditions also. So I'm sorry I cannot say more, but for us, for example, at the Ateneo, they suspended teacher evaluation because on the one hand, this is as equally difficult for us as it is for the student. However, despite the suspension of the evaluation, Canvas tolerates the existence of certain observers in our courses, such that we have a quality assurance team, a content delivery team, and there's a quality assurance, a content delivery team, and a student help desk that gets to sit in our courses as observers, so that we get also immediate feedback just in case our courses is just too overwhelming for our students or not anymore. We have shifted to a more student-centered and student-sensitive context, precisely because of the pandemic, and we know that this is taking so much toll on our students as well as on us teachers. Ganun po. Si Sir itong Batan says, when we determine the number of modules contained, is it based on the number of groups? It will really depend on the number of learning outcomes and whether it's already attained. Yun po yung sagot ko doon.
One more, sir, from Sir JM or Ma'am JM to. I commend the emphasis on erring on the side of compassion as a collegial body. How do you resolve the concerns raised by your students, and how do you ensure that every teacher really considers students' welfare in designing modules and facilitating learning?
For us, we have a constant check. We have a series of checks. Our modules are actually subjected to the check of our chair. So we have multiple project coordinators. Like I'm the project coordinator for the 4th year level. So that means I'm the one helping the associate dean for the core curriculum in terms of really looking at all the courses in the 4th year level and facilitating the integration of courses and the non-academic formation or the formation programs of the Ateneo into the courses. Yun po yung trabaho ko. But other than the 4th year project coordinators, of which I am one, we also have a 4 schools project coordinator, School of Humanities, Social Science, Science and Engineering, and JGSOM, which facilitates the different standards or the assurances in their courses. So ito yung lateral, kami yung vertical and horizontal. So parang banig po yung set up namin sa Ateneo. Kaya yung course na plinano, aakyat po siya sa aming lahat for approval so that the checks are assured that the students are actually, the welfare of the students and the principles that we employ are actually going to be implemented. And I receive a private one. I'll just read it personally first. The mode of grade. So the question to me is a question on grading students fairly. As I said, no, if the test really measures the competencies, whether it's sent online or is sent through the learning packets and therefore sinagutan ng manually, if it measures the learning outcomes, it already answers the question of fairness. So the students can cheat if they want to cheat. Even right now, you can simply Google cheating in Canvas, cheating in Google Classroom, cheating in Moodle. There are cheats. But I think more than they're only able to cheat if what we provide them, the questions we ask of them, are actually questions that are Googleable. When these are questions that demands competencies, it is not possible for them to cheat, because what we are already measuring is our competences, and therefore manifestations of the application of their skills and knowledge, more than mere parroting or repetition of ideas. So if the assessments that we develop are authentic, because and when I say authentic, they are very clear applications of knowledge and skills to concrete scenarios, then it's very difficult to cheat that. And therefore, whether it's written down or whether it's actually online, mediated through technology, submitted or via the LMS, it should not be a problem, sir, if I may just answer that question.
And Mark, then for entertain 3 more questions po. So we have 2 questions po in the chat box. May I read, sir?
Ako na, ma'am. Okay na.
Via Zoom is high bandwidth. Is there a low bandwidth alternative?
The oral exams for us have shifted to a point where we give them the thesis statements, and then we give them 15 minutes to explain the thesis statement, and then they send it to us. They upload it to their own Google Drive, and then they just give us the link, and then they just give us access to the link. So the more interactive part is gone, but at least if you have the right rubrics, and here we have to define the rubrics again, you can actually clarify whether the student was able to capture the idea, understand the idea, or even was able to evolve the idea into the form of an insight. And I think that's what we're really measuring when we have an oral exam. No, the assimilation of information to the point of insight. So Sir Jeff says, I know that because of this adaptive learning, we are up to somehow become lenient with regard to assessment tools. For example, problem sets. Should we give students different problem sets to prevent cheating? I think that it can be an LMS issue. It can be an LMS thing already, Sir Jeff. Like you can randomize the release of questions, but not only randomize it, put time limits to it so that cheating is prevented. But at the end of the day, especially for problem sets, so I suspect this is a mathematical course that will demand high objectivity or the demonstration of skills. We need to be able to conceptualize a different way of giving assessments wherein the same skills are demonstrated. Ganun po yung aking take on the matter.
Sir Jeff has a follow-up question. Do you have any recommended app or software we can use for online quizzes problem sets with timer expiration?
Canvas as a tool can even facilitate the inclusion of certain formulas, and can also facilitate the locking of the system so that it locks immediately after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, something like that. And then it also allows you to demonstrate for them the steps on how they were able to answer the problem set, which is also necessary from our end. So I suggest Canvas as the LMS to use. And there's a free Canvas. So there's an institutional Canvas for those who acquire. But Like for us right now at Ateneo, we're using the free canvas while we're still migrating to the Ateneo canvas. But I suggest Canvas, sir, because Canvas facilitates the locking. Canvas facilitates the rotating of the items, even the rotating of multiple choice answers. Canvas allows that also. So kaya mahirap konti mag-cheat kasi at least nagro-rotate, tumatakbo yung oras, tapos depended. So even the items can move, no? So if you have like a 15-item exam, you only need to tell them you only have one chance to do this one, to answer this one, and the very moment you enter, that's it. It locks, parang ganon. There is free Canvas access. It's canvas.instructure.com. So only that in the free Canvas, they only allow you 500 MB. So I suggest you maximize the external links, especially for videos and especially so that you reserve the 500 MB only in the inputting of files that are really necessary. Parang ganon. Yun lang po naman.
Doc Mark, I think this will be our last question. The last question for today po. Any tips on contextualizing curated materials from JM?
The only way to contextualize curated materials is to, well, for the meantime, we'll use what is there because we're really in the age of a pandemic. It's just difficult to produce new videos that is really contextualized. However, as teachers, the curated material can only constitute your content. As coaches, we still need to assimilate it. Diba? We need to be able to put it in the level of comprehension for our students. So I think the way to move it is two-prong. The other one is for you to assimilate it, for you to contextualize it for your students, but you can also provide it as a learning task for the community so that they automatically directly learn to apply it to their context. So that's how I will look at it. So on the one hand, I as a teacher tries to explain it to you in a contextualized manner, but also you as a student, to demonstrate certain skills, should be able to contextualize certain materials.
Siguro, Sir Mark, let's just entertain the question of Mo Langko. Last week, we learned that timed exams are disadvantageous to students with low bandwidth access. So please, sir.
Yes. Yeah, well, all of these have pros and cons, but as I agree with you, Sir Mo, if the student's Wi-Fi access is fluctuating and he enters the quizzes and then the Wi-Fi fluctuates, it will lock immediately, and that's it. It will really lock. That's the reason why we always suggest teachers to try to think of other means of really assessing the outcomes that is expected. When there are very long quizzes, my suggestion there is that you extend the deadline to more or less 1 to 2 weeks, and then you tell that to your students so that your student who is from a low bandwidth or who's using a low bandwidth internet can in the 2 weeks find a way to get a high bandwidth. Pero ideal po talaga yon. Yun sasabihin ko. Kaya ako, my quizzes are only like 5 items, 6 items. Pero nakakalat siya. Every after my 6 minutes lecture, there's a 5-item true or false or 5-item multiple choice. So you don't need to give a very huge number of items. You can measure them directly, especially if it's a check for understanding. So you can provide even 3 points lang. So konti lang, so that just in case it fluctuates, it will not be that injurious for the student. But what if just in case the student's Wi-Fi does in fact fluctuate? You can provide that student a different setup. Like in Canvas, you can choose the student. So pwedeng all sections, pero pwede rin ipiliin mo lang yung estudyanteng yon, and then you can give that student 2 times, or you can give him number of tries, increase the number of tries to 2 or 3 number of tries. So mga ganon. And then you just get the average score or the highest score. Bahala ka kung ano yung gusto mong ibigay sa estudyante. Pero the way I look at it, as I said, err on the side of compassion. So we give it the benefit of the doubt. It's always safer to give our students the benefit of the doubt. So we always do it like number of times, pwedeng dalawa, pwedeng tatlo, and then you can just put rotating items, not only rotating in terms of the number of questions, but also rotating in terms of options. Pwede rin po kasi yon, lalo sa multiple choice type exams. So then we can play it depending on what's most feasible for them. My suggestion is you give them number of tries, and then you can either record the highest score or you can get the mean score. That will be representative of how they performed in the assessment, in the objective assessment. Pero gaya po sabi namin, yung objective assessment, hindi talaga masyado siyang ine-encourage. Kasi nga ina-encourage natin, wag lang knowledge and skill, kundi mas application of knowledge and skill. The competence, not just KSA, but the competences. Yun po. Salamat po ng marami.
Thank you, Dr. Mark. Thank you everyone for participating in our second webinar. To end our session, may I request everyone to open your video cam. Let's all sing the UP Naming Mahal. Thank you, Dr. Mark. Thank you, everyone. Special thanks to ITC, the Dean's Office, care of Sir Melvin and Ma'am Beth, and of course, Sir Greg for coordinating this event. Requesting all participants to answer the evaluation form that I will be sending in the chat box. Again, I'm Prof. Sai Pakarangan, inviting you in our next webinar on August 13, 2020. That's next Thursday, 9 to 11. Our third topic would be Teaching with Technology in a Flexible Learning Module by Mr. John Gabriel P. Pelias from the University of California, Santa Cruz. May I request again for a photo op po? Kindly open your video cam para po mapicturean po tayo ni Sir Melvin.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Apo.
Oh, customer. Thank you. You're a blessing.
Si Kamot Kanyami.
Naayos po yung ating mga photo op. Okay, 9 o'clock po tayo next week ha, kasi yun po yung 6 o'clock sa California time. So we will have with us John Pelias. Okay, graduate with the highest GWA in UP's history. That's what before Tiffany Oy, of course. So 6 o'clock po yun. But we always believe in Diliman that he's the highest. Of course, we have bias kami, mat yun. Pero anyway, ayun, we will have him next week. And by the way, talking about Canvas po, I already talked with the UP-LB administration. September ho ang ng UP system kasi UP system po ang magbibigay ng ating LMS. So nag-request na rin po ako ng permiso. Mauuna po tayo sa CHE. Umpisahan na natin sa CHE ang training sa Canvas. Hindi na natin hihintayin yung training. Para pag may training tayo, kasi requirement yun for Canvas, sila magti-train. Okay, at least meron na tayong alam talaga sa Canvas. So I will be requesting people, also friends in the Philippines to help us train and capacitate ourselves sa Canvas kasi nakita natin, naghihintay tayo sa UP system. So we cannot wait. So UP, I already mentioned to Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor that CHE will organize. If the other colleges would like to attend, they are free. But we definitely, after all this series of webinars, we will have the first Canvas training. So again, maraming salamat para sa UP nating mahal. Maraming salamat, Sir Mark. That's for sharing to us the Ateneo way. Thank you, and thank you. Okay, marami pong salamat sa inyong lahat. Maraming salamat. Thank you, Teacher Sai, and thanks for everyone. Thanks to all.